Welcome to Jackie's Craft Table. Hello everyone, welcome. I'm here for the In Love Arts shop. I'm going to create some cards using some of their beautiful products, and I want to show you these products first before we get into the card crafting. The first one I have here is called Blooming Rose Die. It cuts out the outline to this rose as well as the leaves. There's so much that you can do with this one. I had a lot of fun playing with that. This one is called Dream Border Die. This one is just pretty. I love the shape of the letters. There's so much you can do with this. This die is perfect for inlay die cutting techniques. In fact, all of the dies that I'm going to show you would work perfectly with this. Next, I have the Sweet Cupcake dies, and you get a lot of dies in this cute set. You get this huge cupcake. It has a darling little bow around it. You get 3 different candles. And just look how cute this happy birthday die cut is. The cupcake die also cuts out these cute little confetti shapes, and you also get an extra little bow. You can make so many fun birthday cards with this little set. Next is the bold alphabet dies. Again, I love the look of these letters, and they also cut out the little highlights. They almost look like little balloon letters. You can separate them, of course, but I just left mine together to show you what they look like. And just look how that negative piece looks. And actually, I'm going to create my first card using that. But the little highlight pieces just pop out easily. So much fun. I just love the look of these. You can create your own sentiment with dies like these. So I think they're a must for every stash. Next, I have one of their embossing folders, and I love this one for summer because it has the most beautiful seashells and starfish all over it. It's called SeaWorld Plastic Embossing Folder, and it just embosses beautifully. And last, I have a set of stamps. This one's called Summer Vacation. There are lots of darling summertime images in this set, and I just love how they're drawn. I will have all of the links to these products listed below and over at my blog. So let's jump into our first card. I'm going to be doing a lot of Distress Oxide ink blending in this video. I had so much fun with it. But for my first card, I'm going to create a rainbow. This is a piece of Bristol Smooth cardstock. And this kind of cardstock is great because it has a coating on it that allows you to get a really nice blend. So I'm going in rainbow order. I will also have all of the colors of the Distress Oxides I'm using listed over at my blog. And I'm just using a piece of paper so that I can keep my fingerprints out of the ink. Some of the colors I'm trying not to blend together like the blue and the orange because I don't want it to look muddy. But it doesn't have to be a perfect blend because I am going to be putting a die cut over this panel. I'll show you here in just a minute. I'm using Twisted Citron for the green, and it just wasn't dark enough, so I'm adding a little bit of the blue color over it to darken the green. So here is that same panel I showed you just a minute ago, and I'm cutting it down so that it is a little bit smaller than an A2 sized card. So I left these dies together. I didn't pull any of them apart, and I just die cut the whole thing. I'm going to pop it up using some foam tape and some foam squares. This card would be great for like a teacher's card with a cute alphabet. But I just wanted to pop this up off my ink blended panel. Now I can pull off the release paper and attach this to the front of my panel. And look how cute that looks with all of the colors behind these letters. You can see the little notches impressed into this panel because I left the dies together. It's the little metal connectors. But I think that just adds a charming touch to it. It looks intentional. And now I can add that to my white card base. I use some dot liner to attach this. And I saved the letter H and I, and I also ink blended over them with some red and orange ink. So my sentiment is going to say hi. I'm adding a layer of foam tape behind these pieces. I do come back later and add another layer of foam tape just to pop it up even higher from the white panel. I thought about cutting out the high sentiment with black cardstock just to really make them pop, but I just love how it looked. I'm adding a little bit of sparkle over the high. And then to make it stand out a little bit more, I'm adding some beautiful clear enamel dots. These are also from the In Love Art Shop. I use these a lot. They're so shiny and beautiful. And I'm just kind of putting them around my high sentiment. I probably should have even made them green just so they didn't fit in so well with the F and the G. But I had a lot of fun putting this card together. And here is a close-up look at this. Next, I'm going to use the SeaWorld embossing folder, and I'm going to allow some of the paper to stick out. I want a portion of this panel flat for my sentiments. And here is what it looks like, all embossed. I just love the look of this. It's so pretty. I'm using Desert Storm cardstock just to make it look like sand. And I'm going to do a little bit of ink blending over this panel. So I'm going to use some tape. This is Post-it note tape to tape it down to my mat. I chose some really pale colors. This one is called Tumbled Glass. I'm using some foam blending tools to do this. It really brings out the pattern when you add some ink over it, and it just adds it to the raised edges of this pattern. I really like the foam blending tools for this technique because it won't get into the crevices just because it's flat, and I'm not pressing down too hard. Next, I'm using some Wilted Violet. I do have some makeup brushes that I use for ink blending sometimes, but I was afraid that those would get into the crevices too much. I'm just putting little pops of color here and there. And then for my third color, I'm using Abandoned Coral, and this is a really bright color, but it just needed a pop of brightness. This is a really fun technique to try, so if you haven't given it a try, I would highly recommend it. I had a lot of fun with this one. I'm not blending the colors too much, I'm just kind of putting a little bit of color down. Coming in with another layer over the top of the same colors. I've been having a lot of fun creating summer cards lately. I'm just so happy summer's finally here. I don't usually send out happy summer cards, but they're just fun to create, and I'm going to send some out this summer. The first official day of summer is coming up fast. It's on June 20th. The weather has been pretty nice here in Chicagoland, very wet, but a lot of sunshine mixed in with that. I'm using the bold alphabet dies for my sentiments. It's going to say hello, and I'm using more of the Abandoned Coral so that they will match my card panel perfectly. I'm just kind of pouncing on the color. I'm putting down a thick coverage of ink so that they are nice and bold. The second part of my sentiment comes from the stamp set, and it just says summer. And I want it to match my card panel too. So I'm using the same tumbled glass, and I'm just blending it across this piece of white cardstock. Before I stamp my sentiment, I am going to allow this piece to dry. Once it's dry, I can stamp up this sentiment. I'm using my VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink. And I'd like to stamp it up a few times so it's nice and crisp. And then I'm going to use a die from my stash to cut this out into a banner shape. By the pink color of this die, you can tell it's from Pink and Maine. I love their pink dies. But I'm just going to tape that into place, and then I'll run that through my Sizzix Big Shot machine. And that is ready to go. I'm going to put tiny pieces of foam tape behind all of these letters. And I'm putting the H and the O down first. And that will help me to line up the middle letters equal distance from each other. You can see the foam tape behind the highlight cuts in these die cut pieces, but I really liked this because it added some white highlights to these letters. Otherwise, you just see the brown paper behind it. I'm also going to put some foam tape behind the summer sentiment and attach that below it. I also used my corner chompers to round the edges of this panel. I'm going to pull in a few more of the clear enamel dots. This will just add some bling to the card. These are my favorite enamel dots lately. I just seem to use them on everything. So I have my white card base ready to go, but I am going to use my corner chomper again on that, just so it matches the corners of my panel. And I'm just using a 1/2 inch chomp on these. I love this little tool. I've had it in my stash forever. The other side of this also cuts out a 1/4 inch chomp corner. And I'm just going to use score tape again to attach my card base. I really love the color palette on this card. And that's all there is to it. I'll show you a close-up here. Look at those gorgeous seashells impressed on this card. Just love it. On card number 3, I'm going to use the Dream die. I'm going to do some selective die cutting. I don't want the bottom edge to be cut out. I just want the Dream and the edges to die cut. And now I can just carefully pop this out. Look how beautiful that is. So much fun. This was a really fun die to play with. So I'm going to ink on a rainbow behind my Dream die cut. My first color is Worn Lipstick. It's just going to be a very soft rainbow. Next is Squeezed Lemonade, and then Twisted Citron. I'm using another Post-it note just to keep my fingers out of the ink. And then I'm using Tumbled Glass, and my last color is Wilted Violet, and I'm just carefully blending those together. If you don't feel like coloring, but you want to use a lot of color on your card, inks are definitely the way to go. They're so fast to use. I'm using some more dot liner to attach my rainbow panel onto my white card base. And I thought about softening the edges of this one, but I decided just to leave it nice and sharp. And now to attach the die cut, and I was talking to my kids at this moment, and so I'm putting the tape on the wrong side. I do it very carefully. There are a lot of interruptions at my house, but that's all right. And this is where I realize my mistake. If you don't have one of these in your stash, you definitely need an adhesive eraser like this. I was considering die cutting it again, but I just thought I'd give this a try, and it just pulled off the adhesive perfectly. And now I can flip it over and put the tape on the correct side. Actually, I'm going to use glue this time. And I'm just putting little dabs of it across this panel. I'm putting little dabs of glue behind the letters too, just so that they lay flat. And now I can attach this to my card. I just love the white look of the cardstock in front of this rainbow. So pretty. I did end up die cutting this again with some metallic silver cardstock. I just needed the stars so that I could attach them like sequins on the front of this panel. This was a really fun card to put together, and it went really fast. But here is a close-up look at this. On the inside, I used another die from the In Love Art Shop. So my full sentiment says, "Dream big." I have to apologize for this next card. I lost a lot of footage on this one, but I will explain how I put this together. I cut out my rose with some white cardstock. I pulled out all of the inside pieces and sponged on some candied apple. And to make the pieces inside the rose look dappled like this, I just lightly pounced, and I didn't apply a full coverage. And I really liked the kind of distress look of this. I glued it down flat to this piece of wood panel pattern paper, and now I'm just working on my sentiment. It's going to say Rosy Day. I used more candied apple and twisted citron Distress Oxide inks to color them in. And now I spend a lot of time putting foam tape behind them because I want the letters raised up. And I wish I had raised up the flower too. I think that would have looked really cute. But these are the bold alphabet dies I'm using for my sentiment again. For my last touch, I'm putting down a few pearl hearts. These are again from the In Love Arts shop. I just thought the pearls went nicely with this pretty rose. Inlaying all of these little pieces was fun to do, but it was kind of time consuming, especially the teeny tiny pieces on the leaves. But it was a fun process. I really enjoyed it. There is so much you can do with this beautiful die. And here is the card all done. I need to look in my stash and see if I have the sentiment stamp that says "Have a," and I think that would complete the sentiment just a little bit more. On card number 5, I'm using the summer vacation stamp set. I did a little bit of masking and stamped them out first. Again, I apologize for losing the footage on this. I then masked all of my images and did some ink blending with abandoned coral, spiced marmalade, and fossilized amber. I want this card to have the feel of a hot sunny day at the beach. This is another piece of the Bristol Smooth cardstock, and now I can do a little bit of Copic coloring over these images. I'm going really slow coloring in these glasses just because the frame is so narrow. I just have to do it very gingerly with this brush tip. I do end up going out of the edges a little bit, but the blender marker really comes in handy just to erase some of the mess ups that I made. So the glasses and the flip-flops are going to be in these hot pinks, and it's RV02, 04, and 06. I think this is my favorite pink combination. I do use this a lot. I'm using this piece of white paper to protect my panel. Before I start filming, I like to put lotion on my very dry hands, and I didn't want to transfer any of that lotion grease onto this panel. Also, any kind of moisture will reactivate these Distress Oxide inks. And I didn't want to distress this panel. I just like the really smooth blend of these 3 colors. I go back and forth between these markers just to get a nice smooth blend. Next, I'm using an E51 on the flip-flops. I'm also going to come in with an E53 for my shadows. I'll use this same color combination on the tote bag. At first, I thought this color was getting lost in the background and I wasn't liking it. But once I come in with the darker marker, the E53, it really adds some nice contrast to it. I do go over the flip-flops and the tote bag several times just to make it good and dark. I also pull out some teal Copic markers to color in the towel and some details on the tote bag. And here is my piece almost completely colored in. You'll notice I put some grays on the sunglasses, and I used the RV04 to color in the earpiece behind it. The gray ink really helps to mute it so that it looks like it's behind the lenses. And the grays I like to use lately are the neutral tones, the Ns. I seem to prefer them over the warm grays and the cold grays. I'm just coming in with more of the E53 to deepen my shadows on the tote bag and on the flip-flops. It just wasn't dark enough for me. I'm using N3 to add shadows to the inside of this tote bag. This image already has the shadow lines drawn in for me, so I'm just adding this single marker to it. I'm not going to deepen that up at all. I'm adding some more pink markers for the details on this bag. This card really makes me want to go to the beach and lie in the hot sun and read a good book. But that probably won't be happening this year, so I'll just have to make do with my backyard. I'm using more earth tone markers to add little dots to indicate sand. This will ground my images and make it look more like a beach. I'm adding a darker brown next, just to add a few more little dots. I usually use a white Jelly Roll pen as well to indicate sand, and that adds some cute highlights, but I forgot on this card. But I do come in with a gray marker just to add a little more shadow around some of these images. And the gray really helps to ground it. I'm not making it really dark, just a slight indication. I think the stamp set would have been even more fun if it had a little book image with it. I'll have to go dig in my stash and see if I have one to add to it. For my sentiment, I'm going to put this panel in my Mini Misty, and I'm using some Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink, and I'm stamping out the sentiment that says Summer Sunshine. Now I can pull this out, and I'm going to use some more dot liner to attach this to my card base. I'm adding a few enamel dots. They match really well with my Copic coloring, and it adds just little bright pops of color. And that's all there is to this card. I really love how images look when you overlap them when you're stamping them out. It does take a little more effort to mask and stamp, but I just love the results. And for my last card, I'm going to do even more Distress Oxide blending. I'm using more of the Post-it note tape. I'm protecting the edges of this card because I want there to be a rainbow stripe right down the middle of this panel. And I'm starting out with Candied Apple, and I'm going to put the ink down really thickly this time. My next color is Carved Pumpkin, and I just go back and forth between the different colors, getting a nice smooth transition. My yellow is Squeezed Lemonade, and I'm using Cracked Pistachio for the green. The blue is Salty Ocean, and the violet is Wilted Violet. And again, I'm using a piece of Bristol Smooth cardstock. Now I can peel off the masks. I love this part. The white borders really makes this rainbow pop. Love that. I'm using the white die cuts that I showed you at the beginning of this video, but I did cut out my sentiment one more time. I like to glue them together just to add a little more substance to the sentiment. And if you use liquid glue, they're really easy to line up and wiggle together. Since I'm not going to be adding any color to the cupcake or the sentiment, I wanted to add a little spark of silver. So I pulled out my Versamark ink pen, and I'm just going to add a little bit of the embossing ink over this image. And then I can pour on my Silver Sparkle Wow embossing powder. I'm just using my reverse tweezers to hold it and tap off the excess. I warmed up my heat tool for about a minute, and then I brought it to the sentiment to melt the embossing powder. I'm going to do the same process just over the bow on this cupcake. These pens are really great to have in your stash if there's just a small area that you want to heat emboss. And now I can pour over the embossing powder on this bow. All of the color in this card is just going to come from that rainbow stripe that I blended onto it. And now I can melt the bow on this cupcake. There were a couple of places that I missed, so I did this process with the bow twice just to get good coverage. Doesn't that look so pretty? And now to put this card together, I'm adding it to another white card base. And I'm going to go ahead and put more foam pieces behind my cupcake and behind my sentiment. And this will pop it up a little bit and add some cute dimension. Again, there's so much you can do with this die set, but I just wanted to keep it kind of simple this time. And just let the colors show through the openings in this die cut. I love how this card turned out. So much fun. If you're interested in any of these products, I do have a 10% off coupon code for you in the description box below. I also have the link to the In Love Arts shop Check them out. Their prices on their different products are just amazing. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and I'll be back again soon with another video. Bye!